Good morning, everybody. This is Bill McDonald, the Writing Doctor, and today I wanted to focus on the revising portion of my STAAR ELA writing folders. I've updated them to make sure that when your students are working on reading or any other subject for that matter, that they can use this portion to answer open-ended questions, which is what's going to have to happen across grade levels and subjects, at least from 3rd through 8th grade. As you see here, think about the red, the yellow, and the green light of a traffic light. They're going to get a topic or a question. En español, vamos a tener un tema o una pregunta. They're going to have to answer the question, so the red light is the question. The answer, la respuesta, is amarillo. The answer is yellow. Usually they want one idea that responds to the question in a complete sentence. And then the idea, if you're just focusing on open-ended short answer questions and they go straight to the green, how do you get the green light? Well, explain yourself. Give an example of what you mean. And hopefully, because you understand the vocabulary involved with that subject, you'll be able to use higher vocabulary and your personal voice in your response, the way you think and feel and believe about the topic. And that could be for any subject. Just one example that comes to mind is the 4th grade this past year asked your students, what about an invention that you feel has made a difference? Well, if the science teachers were just asking a lot of multiple choice questions in the lower grades, and 4th grade included, it means that they might not have understood what an invention was, and even if they looked it up in the dictionary, they might not have known how to respond to it unless they were in science or perhaps even in social studies, learning about inventions and what impact that they have on the world. So that's the open-ended short answer part, where it's going to connect with reading and other subjects from 3rd through 8th grade, where only 75% of the questions can be multiple choice from now on in the next couple years. But I want to focus on when you're revising PE, when you're revising your passage and your essay. Many students struggle with entire passages and struggle with writing entire essays. So the mistake that many schools make is having the kids read the entire passage instead of just focusing on the bits and chunks that they can understand. That would be like giving a kid a colander that's full of holes and trying to get him to fill it with water. You're going to have to put tape over the holes before you can expect the student to start filling the bowl. And in the same way, you can't ask a student to do an entire passage and have complete understanding if he's only, as you can see here, in the black words at the word, the phrase, the transition, or the sentence level. So I'm going to show you how to do revising PE, passages and essays, in a way that will be more relative to your students. Alright, so remember that when you're doing the editing, which we talked about in our last video, you're looking at the conventions and the grammar using cups, the capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling, and sentences. And if you look at my previous video, you'll be able to see a detailed explanation of how to use this, which is a big, huge portion of the test. Last year's revising test in 4th grade was the most difficult ever, because in many cases, instead of just adding, removing, replacing, or moving one word, one phrase, or a transition, they were being asked to add a sentence to a whole paragraph, or a transition sentence between paragraphs, or a central idea statement involving a whole passage. Okay, so the ARM that I use and the colors that I use are add, remove, replace, and move. And if you look closely at that, green is the add, R is the remove, green is to replace, because once you remove something, you're going to want to replace it with something else, and then M is the move. And you'll see that if you're going to help your kids with testing who have trouble with whole passages, have them look for the questions in the order that you see them in black there. Something else that will help kids who struggle with reading is tell them the other acronym, that if it's a story, then they can remember actors remember more. For those of you that have dual language kids, I want to show you that I have in the primary reading for kids who are behind level, or because they're not ready to transition yet, you can teach them editing in English, cups and the S, editing in Spanish, mupo, mayúscula y minúscula, uso, puntuación, ortografía, oración, oraciones, texto corrido y fragmentos, and it uses basically the same exact order, but I call it mupu. And remember that when you have a sentence that's got great capitalization, great usage, great punctuation, but really bad conventions in terms of the spelling or run-ons and fragments, then you get what the last three letters stand for there is poo. The Spanish version of A.R.M., because we've already just learned the English, is agregar o añadir, remover o reemplazar o remover. So before you replace something, you have to remove it, or mover in yellow. And again, once you have the same thing, palabras, frases, transiciones, oraciones y párrafos. And the same way that you have actors and artists remember more. So in other words, drawing pictures, that will sometimes help you remember the details. If you're the kind of teachers that use the S for A.R.M.S, then you can say actors remember more stories, and artists remember more sequences or settings. Actores recuerdan más en español, artistas recuerdan más. And so if you have kids who are transitioning or behind grade level, even if they're in 4th grade or 7th grade, you might have them start with the primary reading writing folder and then transition over to the English, because just like the STAAR ELA one, you see that it has a dual language component which allows your kids to know how to go in English or Spanish. This might be great for 4th grade for both folders, how to go from a 1 to a 2 to a 3 and a 4. Basically the yellow represents the 1, the blue how to get a 2, the green how to get a 3, and then the red how to turn it all the way into a 4 when you remember to do all the things that are required at the end of the essay. Okay? Alright, so let me show you my graphic organizer that helps your students implement A.R.M. when it comes to developing an organization, fixing the content of a passage or their own essay. So the bottom half of my graphic organizer is an actual A.R.M., and the top part represents an entire paragraph or a passage, which many kids struggle with. So what I really suggest is that you, before you have your kids start just reading passages randomly, have them start at the bottom and look for questions whose answer choices only have a word. So look here on the left hand side. Again, we have the green, the red, the yellow, and I have the blue just for those of you teachers that believe in the substitute word, which to my recollection has never shown up on a STAAR test, but some of you use it, so I wanted to be able to implement it for you. So think of the green bracelet as adding, removing, replacing, moving, or substituting different things. Okay? Remember, when it's a story, they can use the different acronym actors, remember, more, stories, or steps, or you can say artists, like I mentioned, artists remember more, steps, or stories if you write out the steps. So the idea is start at the word level, see if there's any where all your kids have to be able to do is understand a sentence and how to do something with a word. Normally, what they're going to ask your kids to do is take out a word, remove it, because it's too vague, it has repetition, a run-on, a fragment, or it has nothing to do with the content or the meaning. They'll replace that word, put something else in, or add something that's more specific, that's supporting of the sentence, or a sentence that supports. And I would suggest that you have your kids do that, because some of your kids failed by 2, 3, or 4 questions. Then have them start on the revising portion with the easier questions, not the more difficult ones. Another one that's sometimes easier to do is the questions that involve what transition. So as you notice, the left side, think of a teeter-totter. On the left we have our teeter, in the middle we have the transition, and on the right we have our totter. So that's going to ask your kids what transition phrase can be used to go from sentence blank over to sentence blank. Okay? And most of the time the relationships are cause and effect, compare for sentence, we'll say sentence 4, and contrast for sentence 5. Action, sentence 4, transition to sentence 5, reaction. You get a detail, like a topic sentence, and then you get a supporting detail. So what kind of transition word is going to be used, or sometimes a phrase. And that's where they can sometimes use the word phrase, which is a little bit higher up on the arm. How do you move from one idea to the next, or one sentence to the next? The next one is the sentence level. They might ask you what sentence could be added to support the main idea of a paragraph. What sentence could be added to support the previous sentence, or the one that's most difficult for kids, they'll say, what is one way to combine sentences blank and blank? So here on these lines, your students would write the keywords. Let's say you're doing sentence 5 and you're trying to combine it with sentence 6. Well, the kids would write down the keywords of sentences 5 and 6 and figure out what's the best way to combine them. The most difficult one is when your kids are having to add a sentence to a whole paragraph, or add a central idea or thesis, controlling idea to a whole passage, which is the top half of my graphic organizer. You see here a whole hand. So think of the palm of the hand as, are we talking about a paragraph here, where they're just going to add a topic sentence or a main idea? Are they going to be adding a sentence? There's a box sentence usually. Are they going to move that box sentence somewhere into one of these places in the paragraph? Or is it possibly a question, the most difficult question, the one that I would recommend your kids do last, if they ask your kids for a central idea statement, a thesis statement, position statement, something that's going to help the focus of the story, then have them do that last, because they would have to understand the introduction, the body, and the conclusion in order to add a clearly stated central idea, controlling idea, thesis of a whole passage. So, as you notice, I added a couple fingers there, because if in a paragraph format there might be 7 sentences, then they would be able to write the keywords of each sentence inside the finger that would help them understand what is this whole paragraph about, so that I can add a good topic sentence or a good main idea. Well, that's how you use a combination of my A.R.M. and my graphic organizers. All of you that ordered the binder this past week, or the folders, received a set of 25 of these graphic organizers for free. Thank you guys, and God bless.